I wasn't born rebellious. I just stopped apologizing for taking up space. Nyssara High. My name is Nyssara. I was raised to be quiet, polite, and forgettable. And I did my best. Until the day I realized the only way to be seen was to stop shrinking. The Valamont estate looked exactly as it always had. Immaculate hedges, limestone columns, and lanterns flickering like they were too good for fire. Everything was staged, right down to the expensive silence that coated the walls. This wasn't a house. It was a press release waiting to happen. My parents' 35th anniversary celebration was the kind of event written about in lifestyle magazines. Catered, choreographed, filtered through the lens of success. What it wasn't, what it had never been, was home. I stepped out of the car by myself. No red carpet welcome. No arms flung around me like the prodigal daughter. Just the same security guard who glanced at my name on the list twice before letting me through, as if even the clipboard doubted my place here. Inside, guests in champagne silk and tailored tuxedos swirled beneath chandeliers imported from Prague. Everything shimmered. Everything sparkled. Except me. Nyssara, darling, you made it, my mother said, appearing beside me like a scent. Expensive, controlled, cold. She air-kissed me once, then again, as if contact might wrinkle her reputation. Her smile was tight, polished. I almost didn't recognize you in that color. Forest green, I said. Silk. Her eyes darted from my dress to the pearl clasp at her own throat. Unusual choice. Everyone else knew the theme was gold. Must have missed the memo. Her smile didn't falter. That would have been too honest. Well, she said, it suits you. Artsy. That word again. Artsy. Like I was a stray cat with glitter on its fur. I spotted my father near the bar, laughing too hard at something a junior partner said. My mother drifted toward him, and I let myself breathe. 1 Mississippi, 2, 3. Then came the voice that scraped across my nerves like sandpaper. Nyssara, I told everyone you'd come in wearing the wrong thing. My sister. Valerie glided toward me in a fitted gold gown, the kind that whispered wealth and screamed, I win. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun, her lipstick precise. She looked like a woman who planned every breath she took and resented anyone who didn't. You look, she tilted her head, faux thoughtful. Bohemian. That's what they call it now, right? I call it mine, I said. She turned to the man beside her, a handsome, suited executive I'd never met. This is Marcus, one of our youngest VPs. Marcus, this is my sister. She paints things. Marcus held out a polite hand. What kind of painting? I smiled. The kind that funds small companies you've probably never heard of, until you do. He blinked, clearly unsure whether I was joking. Valerie let out a forced laugh. Isn't she charming? Still believes in changing the world with a brushstroke. Better than pretending to save it with a slogan, I murmured. She didn't hear. Or maybe she did, but chose not to respond. That was Valerie's power, selective acknowledgement. She could pretend you didn't exist while looking you straight in the eye. Where's your +1? She asked. Or are you still on that solo spiritual journey thing? He's on his way, I said simply. Ah. Her eyes twinkled. Someone finally decided your quirks were tolerable. I let that one hang in the air, unanswered. Because tonight wasn't about her. Not yet. The rest of the evening passed like an over-rehearsed play. Toasts, laughter, violins. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, sipping sparkling water, watching my family perform their unity, smiling just wide enough, clapping just loud enough, always playing to an invisible audience. My father eventually found me. Kiddo, he said, using the word like a joke. You holding up okay in all this glitter? I manage, he nodded. Still working on that art stuff? It's not a hobby, Dad. He gave me the same look he used when I tried to explain why I didn't want to go into finance. A cocktail of confusion and dismissal. Well, you always had spirit. Spirit. The word they used instead of talent. The word they used when they didn't know what else to call you. And then, he arrived. I felt him before I saw him. A shift in the atmosphere. Conversations pausing mid-sentence. Shoulders straightening, heads turning. A tall man in a black suit stepped into the room, his presence quiet but commanding. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. My heart ticked faster, but I kept still. Valerie spotted him first. She blinked twice, then walked toward him with the grace of a woman who thought she'd found the crown jewel. I followed slowly. "This must be our mystery guest," she said. "I'm Valerie, head of PR for my father's company." He glanced at her hand but didn't take it. Instead, his eyes found mine. And for the first time that night, I smiled. He walked past Valerie, straight to me, and without hesitation, wrapped his arm around my waist. "Sorry I'm late," he said softly. "Traffic." Then, to the room, and everyone watching. "This is my wife." He kissed my temple. My beloved wife. Silence is loud when it's full of disbelief. Valerie's face didn't fall, it shattered. And for a split second, I could see every version of her I'd ever known. Smirking teen, calculating adult, polished manipulator. All flickering, lost. "You married him?" she asked, voice strained. "Not recently," I replied. "We just don't advertise." I looked around, letting the silence settle. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter. I wasn't the charity case or the artistic burden. I was the one they didn't see coming. Sometimes silence says more than words, don't you think? Some storms don't come with thunder. They arrive dressed in silence and change everything. The hush that followed Asher's words echoed louder than the classical music, still murmuring from the string quartet in the corner. "This is my wife, my beloved wife." I could feel the weight of the room tilt. Heads turned, eyes widened, forks paused midair. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. My mother's hand clenched her champagne flute so tightly I heard the crystal strain. Valerie's lips parted, but no sound came out. And my father, he just blinked like someone had cut the lights in his brain. Asher stood tall beside me, one hand resting casually at the small of my back. His presence was deliberate, not showy, not cruel, but precise. A man used to commanding rooms without ever raising his voice. The fact that he used that quiet power to lift me rather than eclipse me, that was the part no one could understand. And that, I realized, was exactly the point. Valerie regained her voice first. She laughed, brittle. "You're kidding!" Asher's eyes met hers. Cool, unreadable. "No," he said simply. You're married? To her?" Valerie stammered, like my name tasted sour. "I'd prefer you say her name," he replied. "Nyssara." Her smile twitched. "This is... wow. I just didn't realize. No one knew." "That was the idea," I said. "Privacy. I'm sure you understand, working in PR." Marcus, the young VP, had stepped back, wisely saying nothing. His gaze shifted between us like he was watching a game he hadn't been invited to play. My father cleared his throat and stepped in, attempting to salvage control. "Well, congratulations. I had no idea." "You've said that a lot tonight," I replied quietly. He frowned. "Now's not the time for sarcasm, Nyssara." Asher raised an eyebrow, just slightly. "Actually, this evening's timing was strategic." Valerie's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He looked around the room, at the guests mingling, still listening. "I try not to mix personal with professional, but tonight happens to involve both." That's when the real weight dropped. Because in that moment, people began connecting dots, like why Asher Sterling, the notoriously private CEO of Valiant Holdings, would show up at a modest family anniversary party in Westchester, and why he'd just announced that the ignored, mocked, artsy daughter was his wife. Within an hour, the ripple became a wave. The guests who once whispered behind their flutes were now suddenly eager to speak to me. My name, previously whispered with judgment, was now wrapped in curiosity. Nyssara, could I ask where you and Mr. Sterling met? Are you in design? I thought you were freelance? We'd love to feature your art at the gallery next quarter. It'd be an honor. Valerie stood off to the side, trying to maintain posture, but her eyes betrayed the truth. Panic, confusion, and something else, the unraveling sense that she no longer held the top rung of the family ladder. Later that evening, when most of the guests had left and only the core family remained, the facade broke. We were seated in the smaller lounge off the main ballroom, what they called the family room, though no one ever used it unless for damage control. My father poured scotch. My mother paced. Valerie stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. "You married him behind our backs," she hissed. "I didn't need your permission," I replied, voice even. My mother stopped pacing. "You should have told us. What kind of woman hides a marriage? The kind who learned that sharing milestones with you meant watching them be criticized, minimized, or hijacked." Silence. My father set his glass down harder than necessary. "Is that how you see us?" "I see patterns," I said, "and I've spent years trying to unsee them. But tonight, you saw me." Valerie scoffed. "So this was what? Revenge?" "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "This was reality. You just weren't ready for it." Asher sat quietly beside me, not intervening unless needed. His silence was power. It unsettled them more than shouting ever could. He finally spoke. "Valiant Holdings has recently acquired a controlling interest in Langford Enterprises," he said. My father stiffened. "Langford? That's—" "Yes. The company you've been trying to merge with for the past 2 quarters. We own it now. As of this week, that deal is off the table." Valerie's face drained of color. "But why?" my mother asked. Asher didn't flinch. "Because Langford invests in long-term sustainability. Your business model prioritizes short-term gain. It's misaligned. Nothing personal." But of course, it was personal. Just not in the way they thought. That night, in our car heading back into the city, Asher rested his hand over mine. "I didn't mean to drop the Langford news tonight," he said. "I know." He paused. "But I also didn't stop it." I looked out the window, the lights of the estate fading behind us like an old photograph finally tossed away. "I didn't need them to lose," I said. "I just needed them to see that I never needed them to win." Asher smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I married you. The truth doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it walks into the room wearing your last name. When a house cracks, the noise doesn't come from the first fracture. It comes from the silence that follows, when everyone pretends they didn't feel the shift under their feet." 3 days after the anniversary party, the Valamont name became a whisper. Not the reverent kind. The kind that travels through polished office halls with a tremor of disbelief. By Monday morning, the ripple of Asher's appearance had turned into a slow-building storm. And the epicenter wasn't just me. It was what I represented, the person they'd underestimated, dismissed, tried to erase. But now, no one could look away. The first blow came from Valiant Holdings' internal restructuring bulletin, sent quietly to executives and key investors. It stated that, following due diligence, the pending merger between Langford Enterprises and Valamont Strategic was no longer aligned with company values or sustainability benchmarks. Valerie's phone began ringing nonstop. So did my father's. And when they couldn't get the answers they wanted from Valiant's regional partners, they turned to the one person they had never expected to need. Me. I was at my apartment in Soho when the call came. Not from them, of course not, but from Gloria, my mother's long-suffering assistant. "She asked if you'd come for tea," Gloria said, hesitating. "She said it's just a chat, no pressure." I almost laughed. Tea. When they needed me to disappear, I was dramatic, ungrateful, difficult. Now that the floor was shaking under their feet, I was invited for tea. "Tell her I'll come," I said. Their brownstone was still immaculate, every shrub trimmed, every brick scrubbed. But when the door opened, my mother looked like she hadn't slept since Friday. "Nyssara," she breathed, stepping aside. I walked in without touching her, without looking too long. The same house that once felt so suffocating now seemed smaller, like someone had dimmed the illusion. She led me to the sunroom. It was the same one I used to sit in as a child, practicing piano I never asked to play. The same room where I once overheard her tell my aunt, "Nyssara's always been a little off rhythm." There were 2 cups set neatly on the glass table. One for her, one for the daughter she finally saw. "I thought we could talk," she began. I sat down. "So, talk." She smiled, tight, rehearsed. "There's been some confusion, professionally. Your husband, Asher, is making things complicated." I raised an eyebrow. "Is he?" "Well," she exhaled, "you know what I mean. The merger, the optics. Valerie's position is being questioned. Investors are nervous." I sipped my tea slowly. "Maybe they should be." "Nyssara," she said sharply, "this isn't funny." "I'm not laughing." "You're being cruel." I met her gaze. "You taught me that silence was graceful. I assumed you'd appreciate the lesson." She blinked. I watched her carefully paint her next sentence. "We didn't know you were serious about him. If we had, you would have what? Treated me like a person instead of a problem?" She said nothing, and for once, that silence belonged to me. Later that night, Valerie showed up outside my building. I spotted her from my window first. She was pacing near the sidewalk, phone clutched in one hand, fury radiating from every inch of her. I opened the door before she buzzed. "Come up or shout from the street." She didn't even blink, just followed me in. Inside, she didn't sit. She spun toward me. "You blindsided us." "You invited me," I said. "You mocked me, in front of your team, your boss, our family. And then you were shocked when the narrative changed." Her eyes gleamed, sharp and bitter. "You think you've won, don't you? You think marrying him makes you better." "It doesn't," I said. "But it does mean you don't get to humiliate me anymore." She stepped closer. "Do you have any idea how hard I've worked? How many nights I've bled for that reputation? And you just waltz in with a last name and take it all." I tilted my head. "Funny. You never cared about my name until it came with consequences." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the girl who used to flinch. And maybe she didn't. Then she threw the real punch. "You always wanted to feel special. Now you're just someone's wife. A trophy, a decoration." I didn't flinch. "Then why are you so scared of me?" I asked. "If I'm just a decoration, why do I make the whole house shake?" The next morning, a leak hit the press. An anonymous source claimed that Valamont Strategic had falsified key ESG, environmental, social, governance, certifications in their merger documents with Langford. It wasn't traced back to me, or Asher, but the damage was instant. Investors began to pull out. Social media caught wind. Jacques Valamont unveiled, trended for 12 hours. By Wednesday, Valerie was placed on extended leave. My father released a statement. My mother went quiet. And me, I took a walk through Central Park and bought myself a hot chocolate. Because sometimes victory doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like calm. Ever watched someone who underestimated you realize they can't anymore? Some truths aren't hidden to protect you. They're buried to silence you. I hadn't set foot in the Valamont summer home since the week after high school graduation. The same week I'd packed a duffel bag, swallowed my voice, and left. They said I ran off in rebellion. In truth, I walked away in silence. The kind you learn after being corrected for crying too loudly. It was Asher's idea to come back. Not for closure. Not even for revenge. "You're not revisiting the past," he said. "You're reclaiming the part they convinced you didn't matter." And for some reason, that stuck. The house in Rhinebeck sat at the edge of a lake, surrounded by pine trees and silence. My father used to call it our retreat. For me, It had always been the place where time stood still, frozen somewhere between a gilded illusion and forgotten dust. The staff no longer worked here full time. No one had been in for months. The key still sat behind the third brick under the porch stair. Some habits die hard. As I stepped inside, the scent of old cedar and stale perfume hit me with a wave so heavy I nearly turned back. I didn't. The living room was just as I remembered it. Ivory furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts waiting for permission to exhale. I passed by the piano, where I'd been forced to play sonatas for guests who never learned my name. By the hallway, where I overheard my mother once say, "She's so intense, everything's dramatic with her." And then I found my room. Smaller than I remembered. Dimmer. Everything had been stripped. No posters, no old sketchbooks. Just a desk, a window, and a closet door left slightly ajar. But something about the wall behind the desk made me pause. I remembered a day when I was 13, home with the flu. I'd drawn a mural on that wall in pencil. A girl standing on a cliff, hair in the wind, her face turned away. My mother had screamed. My father had painted over it that same night. But now, in the right light, I could still see faint grooves beneath the paint. And then, a crack. I tapped the panel softly, then again with my knuckles. Hollow. Behind it, something shifted. With shaking hands, I pried at the edge until the wood splintered just enough to give. Inside the wall was a faded envelope, brittle with time. My name was written on it, in a script I hadn't seen in years. Grandma Althea. I sat down slowly and opened the letter. My sweet Nyssara, if you're reading this, then either I was brave enough to leave it behind, or they were foolish enough to let you back in. I see you, even if they never did. You shine too fiercely for a family that only loves what it can control. That's why they tried to smother you, because you reminded them of everything they gave up on in themselves. I set aside something for you. They don't know. They can't touch it. It's yours. Don't let them rewrite you. Love always, Grandma A. I hadn't cried in months. Not when Valerie mocked me. Not when Asher revealed our marriage. Not when my family unraveled like a badly tailored lie. But this? This cracked something deeper. I didn't realize how starved I'd been to feel believed. To have someone say, "You're not imagining it. They really did try to erase you." And someone who loved me enough to leave proof. I called Asher that night. "I found a letter," I said. There was a pause on the other end, a silence so respectful it felt like a hand on my shoulder. "I'm glad," he said. "What now?" "She left me something. I think it's property. A small house in Hudson, maybe. I remember her talking about it once, but they always said she sold it." "Let me help you check the deed history," he said immediately. "If it's in a trust or frozen, we'll trace it. Quietly." I sat on the porch steps and looked out at the lake. "She saw me," I whispered. "You always were visible," he said. "They just refused to look." 3 days later, Asher sent me the documentation. The property was still in her name, quietly protected in a legal shell, untouchable by my parents, never tied to the family trust. A one-story brick house in the woods. A deed signed over to me. 4 months before Grandma Althea died. They knew. They just never told me. I drove up alone. The place was weathered, but alive. Ivy crawled along the brick, and the paint on the shutters had faded into soft blue veins. The inside smelled of lavender and ink. On the kitchen counter was a journal. Not hers. Mine. The one I'd lost at 16. The one my mother said she'd accidentally thrown out. Page after page of charcoal drawings. Dreams. Plans. One entry circled in red pencil. "One day, I'll build something they can't tear down." I sat on the floor and wept. Not from sadness, but from the strange, fierce peace that comes when something long buried rises without permission. I didn't call my parents. I didn't need to. I posted a photo of the old journal online. A simple caption. Full circle. Within hours, former teachers, distant cousins, and a few people I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. You were always meant to do something like this. Your grandmother would be proud. Even Marcus, the VP from Valerie's team, left a quiet message. I get it now. Took me too long, but I do. Asher came up 2 days later. He didn't say anything when he walked in, just looked around, took it in, then kissed my forehead. I thought you'd look victorious, he said softly. I'm just full. Good, he nodded. Victory's loud, but fullness, that lasts. Ever found something that made you feel seen, long after you were forgotten? Some people only hold on to you when they think you're still beneath them. The silence from my family in the weeks following the leak wasn't peace, it was preparation. There's a particular kind of quiet that creeps in before a power move. I'd heard it all my life, usually before some pivot masked as a decision in the best interest of the family. But this time, I wasn't on the outside guessing what came next. This time, I was watching the house burn from the fireproof side of the glass. The first sign came in a neatly typed letter from my father's attorney, addressed directly to me. Not to Asher, not to Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, just Nyssara Valamont, as if the ring on my finger and the fallout from their own actions hadn't occurred. Due to recent public misrepresentations of familial and business dynamics, and in light of actions which have destabilized the Valamont name and its partners, we regret to inform you that you are no longer considered an active beneficiary of the Valamont Family Trust. A petty move, legally irrelevant, but emotionally calculated. They weren't disowning me, they were trying to discredit me, like cutting a ribbon after the parade had already ended, hoping no one would notice. Asher placed the letter on the kitchen counter with a calm I didn't share. They want to make you small again, he said. Because the world finally saw you, I nodded. They need the narrative to match the image. A rebellious daughter, a bitter outsider, not someone who rose without them. He tilted his head. Are we letting this one go? I paused. No. 2 days later, Valerie showed up at my studio. She didn't ask to come in, just walked in like she still had keys to pieces of my life. I'd been working on a commission, a mural for a pediatric hospital, and my hands were covered in cobalt blue. She looked around like she didn't expect to feel anything. That made 2 of us. I'm not here to fight, she said. Good, I replied, because I'm not here to listen to fiction. She stepped forward, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. You made your point, loud and clear. This isn't a speech, Valerie. This is my life. I know, she said, and maybe I deserve the fallout. But Dad, he's losing grip. He's making bad deals. Mom's blaming everyone. I stayed silent. She sighed. Look, I have a proposal. I'm building something new, something outside the family firm. If you invested, even a small stake, it would change the narrative. There it was. Not an apology, a pivot. Valerie didn't want healing, she wanted leverage. I looked her in the eye. You know, when I was younger, I wanted to be like you. Confident, sharp, untouchable. But now I see, what you really are is scared. You always have been. Scared of being irrelevant, scared of silence, scared that your value is only surface deep. That's not fair, she snapped. Neither was stealing my college art project and entering it into that national contest under your name, I said quietly. Her breath caught. I was 17. And I was invisible. She turned to leave. I stopped her. I'll invest, I said, but under my terms. She paused, hopeful. Okay? I'll fund your startup, quietly, but I'll own the controlling stake, and if your name's attached, the work better be original. Her face shifted from confusion to fury. You'd do that? To your sister? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm protecting what's mine. If you don't want the deal, walk. She left without shaking my hand. I already knew she'd take it. 3 months later, the startup, some vague AI-powered PR firm, launched with a bang. Glossy branding, buzzwords, social campaigns that didn't quite land. The honeymoon lasted 2 months. Then came the real test: client delivery. Valerie's team fumbled a major project. One of their flagship accounts threatened legal action over strategic misrepresentation. And just like that, I pulled my stake. The firm collapsed within 10 days. No press statement, no drama, just gone. Asher found me painting late one night. "Was that the plan all along?" he asked. I wiped my brush clean. "No, but it was the risk she chose. You look lighter." "Letting go of what I thought I owed them feels better than I expected." He smiled. "You're not just letting go. You're evicting them." Ever stopped trying to prove yourself to people who never deserved the effort? Telling the truth isn't always an act of defiance. Sometimes it's an act of release. The invitation arrived in a crisp envelope, heavy cream cardstock with my name embossed in gold. Inside was a handwritten note, followed by the printed insignia of Vox and Veritas, one of the most respected long-form magazines in the country. "We'd love to feature you in our upcoming issue on modern resilience. Your work, your presence, and the quiet disruption you've created are already speaking volumes. We'd be honored if you'd share your story, on your terms." I read it twice, then once more aloud. "Not because of your husband, not in light of recent events, not a story of scandal, just your story, on your terms." When I showed the note to Asher, he didn't hesitate. "You ready?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think I'm clear." He nodded. "Then let's begin there." The interview was held at a small artist co-op space in Brooklyn. I'd chosen the location deliberately, intimate, raw, without the gloss of a corporate backdrop. I didn't want marble walls or leather chairs. I wanted concrete, unfinished light, the sound of brushes clinking in a jar nearby. The interviewer, an observant woman named Clara, arrived exactly on time. No entourage, just a notebook and the kind of eyes that didn't blink unless they were listening. We spoke for hours. Not about my family, at least not directly. We talked about art, about invisibility, about growing up in rooms where I was seen but never recognized. We talked about what it meant to create from absence, to reclaim from silence. Clara asked thoughtful, careful questions, and I answered honestly, but sparingly. "I don't want this to be a takedown," I told her at one point. She nodded. "It isn't. It's a mirror. You decide where to place the frame." At the end of our conversation, she asked something I wasn't prepared for. "What do you think your family would say if they read this?" I paused, then smiled faintly. "They'll say I exaggerated, that I misunderstood, that I made it dramatic. But deep down, they'll know I was merciful." That made her blink. "You don't want them to look bad?" "No," I said. "I want them to understand what they looked like when they weren't pretending." 2 weeks later, the piece dropped. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't loud. It didn't name anyone. But it echoed. The headline read, "When the Canvas Speaks, a Quiet Rebellion in Color." Within hours, it was everywhere. The line that caught most people's attention wasn't the one about art or grief or even power. It was this: "Sometimes the most dangerous thing a daughter can do is grow into the person they tried to shrink." Emails poured in, messages, invitations. Suddenly, I was being asked to keynote panels, advise mentorship programs, consult for diversity campaigns in companies that once wouldn't have opened the side door for someone like me. But none of that was what stayed with me. What stayed with me was a single letter, typed. No return address, no signature. Just this: "You told it softly." And it still shook the room. That same week, Asher was invited to speak at a closed-door business ethics summit. Valerie's name was quietly removed from the guest list. So was my father's. Our last name had always been a shield for them. Now it was a question mark. People no longer trusted the name Valamont because of its legacy. They wanted to know who was carrying it forward. And the truth was, they weren't. I visited my parents one final time. Not for closure, for clarity. My mother opened the door like she'd been expecting someone else. I read your interview, she said, without looking me in the eyes. I know. It was thoughtful. That's generous. We sat in the garden, the same one she used to ban me from when guests were over. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone, I said. She sighed. You didn't have to say it for people to know it was us. I turned to her. You didn't have to be that way for me to tell the truth. But you were. Her silence was heavy. She didn't apologize, but she didn't defend it either. And for the first time, that was enough. Ever said your piece without saying their names, and it still landed exactly where it should? Sometimes walking away isn't an escape. It's a declaration that you've arrived elsewhere. The grand opening of the Althea Foundation didn't make the front page. There were no celebrity cameos, no sweeping PR campaigns, just a modest press release, a few quiet features in local arts newsletters, and a photo on my social media. A wide shot of the building with its tall glass windows glowing amber at dusk. The caption read, "Built from everything they said wouldn't last." Inside, the space was warm. High ceilings, natural light, art supplies stacked on reclaimed wood shelves, names of local donors carved softly into the floorboards. But the most important thing in the room that night wasn't the structure. It was the faces. Young artists who had once been dismissed, like I had been. Women who had taken too long to realize their voices weren't too loud. They'd just been in the wrong rooms. Men who'd raised themselves from silence. Children who sketched entire universes on construction paper, unaware they were doing something sacred. I stood near the back, watching, listening, breathing. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. This was about making sure no one else had to. Asher approached with 2 mugs of cider. His hand brushed mine gently as he passed one to me. "Packed house," he said. "They came for the cookies," I said. He smirked. "They stayed for something more." Toward the end of the evening, a teenage girl approached me. She had a buzz cut and a sketchbook tucked under one arm. There was something familiar in her, an edge of uncertainty covered by a thin armor of sarcasm. "You're the founder, right?" she asked. I nodded. "You were the one in that article? The daughter who, left everything behind?" I smiled softly. "Not everything, just the things that never really saw me." She paused, then opened her sketchbook and flipped to a page. It was a pencil rendering of a woman standing in front of a burning house. Calm, untouched. "I drew this the day I got kicked out," she said. "Because I came out." I looked at her drawing and felt something in my chest pull, something sacred and familiar. "What's her name?" I asked. The girl shrugged. "I didn't give her one, but I guess it could be yours." I swallowed hard, not from pain, but from the weight of being understood by someone I'd never met. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the guests trickled out, I stood alone in the gallery. One piece remained uncovered. It was the last painting I'd finished before the opening. I hadn't signed it. It was a silhouette of a woman, not triumphant, not broken, just standing still in a storm, letting the wind shape her, not define her. I stared at it for a long time. And then I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a black ink pen, and signed the corner. N. Not Nyssara, not Valamont. Just N. Enough. The next morning, I received a message from a familiar name. Valerie. I saw the article. I saw the photos. "I don't know what you want from me anymore. But for what it's worth, I'm done trying to outshine something I didn't help build." I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because some stories don't need replies. Just endings. I never heard from my parents again. No lawsuits, no last words, only silence. And for once, it was welcome. Months passed. The foundation grew. So did I. Not higher. Not bigger. Just deeper. I stopped measuring success by recognition, revenge, or resolution. I started measuring it by something quieter. Did I leave things better than I found them? Did I give others the light I once had to beg for? Did I become someone I would have needed when I was 15? The answer? Yes. Have you ever found peace in a goodbye that never needed to be said? I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop proving your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. If you've ever felt invisible, know this: your value doesn't disappear just because others refuse to see it. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's built in quiet choices, in choosing kindness over chaos, and truth over performance. What about you? Have you ever chosen not to return and realized that was the victory? If this story touched something in you, tell me where you're watching from. What part of Nyssara's journey felt personal to you? And hey, if it didn't speak to you, I'd still love to hear why. If you're still here and this video found its way into your heart, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. I'm here and I'm listening.